Okay, so let's get started. Mirabai Bush, welcome to Rewind Yourself. Thank you very much for joining me today and welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Let's rewind your life, not to the highlight reel, to the moment that actually made you. Where would we land as listeners?
Well, not sure that there's one, but well, I think I would say that there was a period in the 60s when this country and Europe also was very chaotic. There was the Vietnam War was going on, and there were a lot of changes happening. Civil rights changes here, and feminist revolution was going on. Many things were happening. And at that time, I decided to take some time away from here and travel and see if I could find any place in the world where things seemed saner, more compassionate. And I traveled from Europe through the Middle East overland and into India. I started in London. At that time, there was a bus that went from London to Delhi. It took 2 months, and it cost about $100. It was quite a journey. We say it was the longest bus ride in the world. We got to India, and as I said, I was just on a kind of general search. I wasn't sure what exactly I was looking for. And the first day I got there, there was a Burmese teacher teaching a meditation course for Westerners. And at the time, there weren't many Americans or Europeans in Asia, in India. So I went to that. And for the first time in my life, I was 10 days in silence and with a meditation technique of just looking at my own mind. And I'd never considered such a thing. So I was studying for my PhD. I was always studying everybody else's minds. It never occurred to me to do that kind of intensive look at the mind itself. Anyhow, I did that, and then I stayed there for 4 of those, they were called courses. By the time I left there, I had begun to see that there was much more to life, to being on this planet, to being a human, than I had glimpsed before. And then soon after I left there, I met an extraordinary teacher, Neem Karoli Baba, who was the embodiment of everything that I had begun to glimpse. I stayed with him for the next year and a half. And when I came back to this country, I was definitely changed.
I'm going to switch a little bit around, but you were the first professional woman to work on the Saturn Apollo moonflight program at Cape Canaveral. What was it actually like to be the only woman in that room doing that work at that moment in history? And I'm jumping around. I'm going to come back to what you said, but I thought that would be quite interesting to learn about in here.
I didn't see who it was, but I saw that you had an astronaut on your podcast. Is that right?
I
Did you
did. I
interview
did.
someone?
Andrew Foisley, he was the chief of astronauts, yeah, a while back. He was actually the only person that agreed to speak to me because all the other ones demanded high fees of $10,000+. And I said, I don't have any money to pay them. And he was very generous and said, I'm actually going to spare you 30 minutes of my time and answer any questions you have. So I was very thrilled and delighted to, be able to speak to him.
Well, I worked there in the 60s. I guess it was 65 and 6. I can't remember. Maybe it was 4 and 5. But yeah, I was married to an Air Force officer, and women were not supposed to work. Officers' wives were not supposed to work. But it was so boring. He worked all day on a program the Air Force was putting the hydrogen bomb into orbit. Imagine. They say that they canceled that program. I hope it's true. But it's top secret. He worked all day long. He couldn't talk about it. And then he went back to work. And so it was hard. And so I decided I would get a job, even though I wasn't supposed to. And I did. I worked on the Saturn Apollo. That was the first manned moon launch. And I had been a book editor before I left Washington, D.C. So I had these skills. I mean, I don't think they wanted a woman, but I had skills that they needed. There I was, and I edited the manuals for fueling the Saturn V with liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen. I've been an English major in college and graduate school. I was a quick study and I got good at it. But it was amazing. I work in a room with 100 men. I'd walk to the water fountain and you could hear like all of a sudden everybody would stop typing, like um it was great. I think that most of them just appreciated that I had a skill I could offer that would make their work better. And they were good to me. It was strange, to say the least. And they had to build a bathroom for me. Later on, I saw this movie. They were working in Houston. They were among the first women. They were black, and they had to walk. Part of the story is they had to walk like 2 buildings away in order to go to the bathroom. But I'm guessing because I was white, they built a bathroom for me because, of course, there weren't any. And anyhow, I worked there for some time. I can't remember, year or more.
And so in 1972, you said you went to India. You went from working for an American's most ambitious technological project to travel through India. So you said that. And what actually happened in between? What made you go? What was the trigger?
During those years, so many changes were happening in the country. As I said, I got very involved in civil rights, in women's liberation, the anti war movement, and also I took psychedelics for the first time. All of those things, this was before I did the meditation course, but they were like shaking up everything that I had taken. I grew up in the 40s and 50s. I was very conventional. And everything that I had been told was true, and all the institutions I thought were unquestionable. Everything got shaken up in those years. I was questioning everything. And then I witnessed so much cruelty, really, the war. It was the first time that we watched a war on television, which sounds like doesn't sound like a big deal, but then it was. We actually could see it as it was happening. And then I got involved with civil rights. I taught some classes that were almost all Black students on campus for the first time. I worked with the Black Panthers doing breakfast for children. Everything was changing, and I needed to ask some big questions about what are we doing and is there another way to do it? And that's really what triggered it.
You spent close to 2 years studying with Neem Karoli Baba. What did it actually teach you? Not a concept, but something you can point to and say that changed how I live.
He didn't teach in Western understanding of teaching. He didn't even teach meditation or yoga or other Eastern practices. Our experience was just being with him. It's always hard to talk about, but he existed in a kind of different vibrational plane, we could say. He was just there, and what it felt like was being in the presence of love and acceptance, presence. I felt completely loved and accepted by him. And also I could feel that his way of being in the world was just so expansive, so huge compared to what I experience as my kind of narrow struggles and with my rational mind, and the way I had the kind of limits that I had put on myself about what's possible in the world. It was just this beaming force of love that made everything feel very expanded and huge. And his teachings were very simple. He didn't say much, but he said some basic things. Love everyone, serve everyone, and always tell the truth and remember what's important. As I left him, I asked, and he very directly said, again, love everyone, serve everyone, tell the truth. I had hoped for something rather specific. We're going back. I've been away from this country for a couple of years. I needed help. I felt like so changed, but what to do? But that's what he said. And we all of us who were with him and came back all had to figure out the ways in which that made sense in our own lives. And everyone did it differently, of course. And yeah, so it's been since then trying to find ways to get that to work. And it's a full time job, but it's been great.
You also taught alongside Ramdas for the last decade of his life. What's something you understood about him in those final years that the public who mostly knows him from Be Here Now never got to see?
Hmm. Well, I first met him at that meditation retreat 50 years ago, and then we remained friends all that time and did many things together. But in the last 20 years before, he died 10 years ago. 10? No, he died in 2019. In the later years, his main message in those years was that, and it's all in Be Here Now, is that psychedelics had opened him to a new understanding of the universe. But you couldn't just keep on doing it. He had this stroke, and it was just like huge loss because he could no longer give talks or really write books without help. But what happened was in the process, and I say this now with new understanding because a month ago tripped and fell and broke my leg. I am in a wheelchair and I won't walk until September. It's 3 more months. And before that, I had never had anything like this happen. You know, what comes with it, you can imagine. First of all, lots of pain and discomfort. And then the experience of helplessness. I can't do anything for myself. I have to have people help me dress and brush my teeth and all of it. And he went through that after being this really powerful person, speaker. Also, he was responsible for so many people. He had just so much going on. And then all of a sudden, he couldn't do any of it. He was really amazing. It took time, but he really let go of that need to be in control. He had written a book on service many years before called How Can I Help? And he said, if I were writing it now, it would be called How Can You Help Me? So that was the shift. But he did it. And he was in pain all that all those 20 some years. And this is true. He never complained. I was with him so much. He never complained. He had neuropathy in his feet, very painful. We'd be meeting first thing in the morning. How was your night? Did you sleep well? Well, he said, I had pain all night in my feet. But he just reported it. He didn't complain about it. We spent those last 2 years talking about and writing this book on dying that we called Walking Each Other Home. He was so ready when he died. One of the things we would ask each other and others, do you have any regrets? That's one way to think about, are you ready to die? Do you have any regrets? And he'd say, I don't, except, and he meant it, I regret that I'm going to make a lot of people sad when I die. And you did, but couldn't help it. He through his life, he had a huge ego and lots of attachment, and he wasn't totally a realized human being when at the time he had this stroke. He had lots of wisdom and this ability to translate Eastern philosophy and combine it with Western psychology and learnings that were coming out of psychedelic experience. He could put that all together and have it make sense for a lot of people who needed help making sense of it all. He was brilliant at it, but he wasn't realized. He had lots of stuff, as he would say. And boy, in those last 20 years, sounds like a long time. It's a long time to be, in pain. But he did it. He really let go of the stuff he was holding on to, who he thought he was, what he thought he wanted. He was in those years, he was really just there, present, and loving. And it was just a joy to be with him. And I think just about everyone who spent time with him during that time uh, agreed. And he had a great sense of humor that did not go with the stroke. And so that was with him until the end. One time he was he had a really high fever, and he was really kind of out of it. We thought, um, Dossie, who was his main caregiver, called me. I was in Massachusetts. She said, "You should come right away." And like 24 hours later, I was there. And we really thought it was over. We stayed around him. And then I went to bed and sleep. And the next morning, he was still there. And we were sitting at the breakfast table when in comes Ramdas to breakfast. He's in his wheelchair. Someone's wheeling him. Ramdas, we said, "What? We thought you were dying." He said, "I was." He said, "But I changed my mind." So he was always really funny.
You mentioned attachments and letting go. You once asked Ramdas right before he died whether he had any attachments left. If I ask you that same question right now, what would your honest answer be?
Well, I have one granddaughter. She's 16, Dahlia. I would so love to see her grow up, so there's that. I think that, in those last moments, if that'd be one of the last things I'd have to let go of. I thought, because when Ramdas and I wrote the book, we went through these exercises so often because we were writing about them. We wanted to like make sure we experienced them. Sometimes we would even lie down, and he was in his wheelchair in bed anyhow. But we'd lie down. I'd lie down on the floor, and we'd pretend we were dying, and then we'd just like wait to see what came up. And I thought I was um, pretty good. And I was saying, after the book was out, people had asked me this question. I'd say, I think I'm really pretty ready. I can't, I know that I don't know everything that's in there, and I don't know what's going to arise up at the end, but I think I'm really pretty ready. But I have to say, breaking my leg and being in after the hospital, which was fabulous, I was in a rehab place for 2 weeks, and it was awful. Everyone who worked, it was understaffed. People were underpaid. Everyone who worked there was unhappy. They didn't. I was alone in this room, and they gave me this button to press if I needed anybody, and I'd press it, and it would be 2 hours before someone would come. And I was in Northampton, Massachusetts, which is a pretty awakened area, but this place was awful. And the room was a gray. There was no window. There was nothing on the walls. It was just grim. And I was really unhappy. And I thought, Mirabai, you know, pretend you're dying. None of this matters. But it still kept mattering. So the message I have is do the practice of seeing what it is you're still holding on to. And you don't have to stop doing that thing. You don't have to stop loving the people in your life, but you want to let go of your attachment that it be a certain way, that go on for a certain amount of time, that they be a certain way, that anything be a certain way. You want to do that practice of letting go of that. And then remember humbly that you may not be seeing it all. And so, like, keep practicing. One time, a long time ago, when I was about my 30s, Kalu Rinpoche, who was a great Tibetan teacher, he was a meditation teacher to the Dalai Lama. I asked him, why should we meditate? And he said, you should meditate to prepare for death. And I thought, I was 30, I thought, oh, I guess I don't have to do that right away. But as I get close, because now I'm 86, I realize that what he meant was it takes a lifetime. It takes a lifetime to wake up. It takes a lifetime to reach that space of being here now, of letting go, of being able to rest in what Ram Dass called loving awareness. And so wherever you are, everyone, just start now.
Thank you for sharing this. And you have a son. What was it like for him to grow up with a mother living the life you chose?
Um, Good question. Ram Dass was his godfather and used to live with us in different places where we lived. And of course, he was surrounded by all this. We often lived communally with others, and this was all part of his life. You're right. And I sort of used to make this joke that he grew up with all of it, and now he's an Episcopalian.
And so you went from ashram into some of the most powerful institutions in the world, corporations, the military, the legal system. What made you believe contemplative practice belonged in those rooms at all?
Mainly because I saw how it changed me and how it changed other friends who'd gone through it. And I just saw that, yeah. Also, I've been a social justice activist and was always desperately trying to make changes in the environment. I spent 10 years working in Guatemalan villages and village development. But I saw that, because Maharaji had said, serve everyone. But I saw there's just so much one person can do in any of those settings. So, what I thought was if I could teach people how to increase their insight and be more clear and focused in the moment, be able to see like new possibilities for the way things can be, cultivate some wisdom, cultivate compassion, then all those people who were doing the work already could do it in a better way. And so we worked with, for example, the heads of all the major environmental organizations in the country. They could do the environmental work, but if they knew how to do that, but if they could do it with more wisdom and compassion, that could be great. And we worked with lawyers and judges who asked us for a special retreat to address how they could be less judgmental. That turned out to be a really powerful program. It's in practically every college and university now. And we worked with social justice activists who felt like they couldn't take time off because there was so much suffering out there that it would be selfish. But we created spaces so that it would be free. Once people who've been working so hard and were almost universally burned out uh, got to learn that this would be a way of taking care of themselves so they could offer more to others. Um, it that became really successful also. Yeah, there were just so many things we did. Business, Google. Well, Google was, this was in 2007. A lot has changed. But then they were just beginning and they were so idealistic and they were so, they wanted to be the best at everything. They were young, almost all male um, engineers who were had been in front of their screens their whole lives. It was the first, digital generation, and they were really good at writing algorithms. But it was time then that they had to start working in teams, and they were really kind of clueless about creating good relationships with other humans. And so we developed a course that combined mindfulness and emotional intelligence. It was the most subscribed course in at Google, and then when Google did it, then the others wanted to do it too. So other tech companies. So that's how it all happened.
Okay, that's quite interesting because that was actually the next question I wanted to ask. So, what it looked like in practice. But when you brought mindfulness into Google, did the institution change the practice or did the practice change the institution?
Well, that's a really great question, and it's really well phrased. I hadn't heard it that way before, but that is the central question. I think the course, I don't really know now, but I think that the course itself and we base it on like really practices with integrity. We didn't change the practices in the way we learned them. And I think and we had in the beginning, we had really great people involved. We had Norman Fisher, who had been the abbot at San Francisco Zen Center, Danny Goleman, who, as I said, had written Emotional Intelligence, and others to introduce it. And I don't really know now that the practice, the course itself, it was a full day, and then I think like 5 short days of doing practice, that it held together. And we did design some things that were specifically googly, as they would say, and mindful. My regret, and may I not take this to the grave, but is that we we saw ourselves as just introducing these practices, and we thought that then the people there would take that awakened awareness into what they were doing. I now wish that we had done more practice in which we worked with folks around being more mindful, aware, compassionate on specific projects they were working on, so they would see how to bring that into their work. Well, we were there, as I said, it was like 2007 to 9. It's just like ancient history compared to where they are now. But they were then working on facial recognition technology. Guess what? All the faces they fed in the beginning were the faces they knew. So they were mostly white and Asian males. Then it happened that that technology was first most used by police departments. And when they used it, many African American males were misread because the computer thought they all looked alike because they had not fed that those faces in. If they had asked themselves, they said, okay, let's take a mindful time out here. Let's think about what have we not been paying attention to? What's not here? What could happen like that, then maybe that wouldn't have happened. That's part of the answer. Many people criticized these kinds of programs in other companies too as being what they called McMindfulness, or just making people more relaxed and accepting at work so they wouldn't challenge the goals or practices of the corporation. And I'm sure that happened. But I do think that our plan, and it was true in the first years, was to have well trained teachers so that they introduce these practices with the potential of transforming your life and your understanding, not just as making you feel better. But it takes some practice and it takes some work to appreciate and continue to be aware of the transformative potential of it all. It's a big question, it's unanswered. That's all I know.
You wrote a memoir, so it would be there for your granddaughter when she's old enough to read it. What do you most want her to understand about your life that you couldn't simply tell her?
Oh, oh no, there's nothing in there that I mean, I could tell her, but as you know, there's a lot that's even here telling stories is different from writing. And the book, which people kept asking me to do an audio of it. I haven't done it yet because I know it takes a really long time. But I could tell her. But I think it's different for the whole narrative. There are themes that run through it that I would like her to understand, not just the facts of what happened. But I tell her everything. There's nothing I wouldn't tell her.
Okay, thank you for sharing. I appreciate it. And when you actually picture your own death, not the version you teach, what comes up for you?
Well, first of all, I know that I don't know. Expect nothing, be ready for anything. But what I imagine is a process of letting go, even of like being there and resting, trying to, and then hopefully resting in awareness, just being there without letting go of thoughts, emotions, and just being there, allowing what happens to happen. As I said, I know I don't know. And so I practice that, just resting in loving awareness. I do a regular practice where I start like paying attention to my breath, breathing in and out. But then by the end of each hour, I usually try to just rest in awareness without paying attention to anything and just being there. I hope that's the way it will be, but I'm aware that I don't know. Also, I'm aware that, you know, I don't know when, but just this fall, it like happened in an instant. I was on Martha's Vineyard, a place I love. It's 10 o'clock in the morning, a beautiful day. And I got out of the car and didn't see this little curb and went down. And that now, like, that means 4 months before I can walk. It just reminded me that we don't know what's going to happen in the next moment.
So Rewind Yourself is watched mostly by young people who feel pulled into two directions, towards security and achievements on one side and towards something more meaningful but uncertain on the other. You actually
Yeah,
lived that exact choice. What would you say to them?
I think it's kind of a false choice. I think it's important to look into your definition of success. What does that mean for you? What it meant for me was trying, and it was a process, discovering what I felt I should be doing at every stage, what that is, and then trying to do it as fully as possible. But whatever it is, you can do it. And I saw this over and over with many of the people we worked with in Contemplative Mind were successful in their field. I don't think it has to be that you give up success or a full commitment to a profession or a job, and it can't be meaningful. It will be meaningful if you feel like you are following whatever your inner direction is. Is this what I'm supposed to be doing? And you're doing it from a compassionate place where in Asia they talk about right livelihood in terms of your work should never directly harm other people. It should, if it can, relieve suffering in whatever way. That doesn't mean you have to be an emergency room doctor or a nun. It means that however you are doing your work and forming relationships with the people with whom you work, that you do it in a way that works to relieve suffering on the planet, help us all live in a way that where we can die without regrets, And in every job, there's always a way to do that. I mean, I know that that's true. When I was working my way through college, which you used to be able to do, I'd be a waitress. I worked in bakery. Then I'd be running big programs and leading the Federal Trade Commission to do something. It's the same. You work on yourself to be a more compassionate human, and then you see ways in which you can do your work in a way that is also more compassionate.
So, in addition, my final question, so from everything you've shared, if your life had a message so far, what would it be? Is there anything else you want to add to whatever you said and shared with us in this interview that you want to leave the audience with, whether young, old, or uncertain?
Yeah, I guess my message is what the message to me was to love everyone and serve everyone in whatever way you can. And the more you do that, the more it just begins to flow naturally. And I just remembered this. Um, I was recently in Chicago, and this a friend who I had met through he was the CEO, had been the CEO of a Fortune 50 company. And we met through a meditation program. And so we got to be good friends over the years. And then he asked me to be the officiant at his funeral. His funeral's in Chicago. There are lots of people coming to it. And I hadn't done this before for anybody, but I agreed. And then so I worked on it for a while, and then I got there. And I was staying at a hotel that I loved there, an old style, old, called the Drake. The first morning I was there, I was getting picked up by his widow. She was going to take me to the funeral. I was standing outside, and the doorman, young African American Chicago guy, said what they're supposed to say. I hope you have a wonderful day. I said, I hope so too. It's a little strange because I'm going to the funeral of somebody I really care about. And I'm giving a little talk, and I've never done this before. And so he said, okay, well, I hope it goes well. Then it did go really well, just sad thing can be. Then the next morning, I came down and he was there, and he said, well, how did it go yesterday? And on my way down in the elevator, I had just gotten this text saying that his Bob's former wife had also been at the funeral, and I'd spent time with her because I knew her, and she seemed to be doing really well. And they had had kids together, and we talked, and she had a heart attack. The doctor said she did die. It was broken heart syndrome. And I don't know why I told the doorman. I just heard it, and it was just on my mind. And he seemed kind. And so I just said it to him. And then he said, oh, oh, he said, I know just how she feels. He said, I feel like I'm getting divorced, and I might lose custody of my kids, and I'm so sad. And just then he's a doorman, right? So this limo pulled up to the curb, and he starts turning away from me. I said to him, I love you. and and in that moment I so did love him. It just arose in me. There was nothing I could do to stop it. I said, I love you. And he turned around and looked at me, and then he turned to the limo with this huge smile on his face, and he opened the door and he said, welcome to the Drake. And I realized that, if you commit to loving everyone, you don't always love every doorman, but every once in a while, you realize that like it's just become part of who you are, and you can't contain it. So that's my that's my not advice, but yeah, love everyone and serve. You can't go wrong.
Wonderful, Mirabai. I really wanted to thank you very much for this insightful interview, all the stories you've shared, and yeah, all the answers you provided to my questions. I really hope that, yeah, it will inspire many people watching it, will give some people more clarity and answers, and hopefully will touch other people's heart, and maybe even a handful of people will, yeah, change, make a difference in life. So I truly appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Well, you asked great questions. I want you to know. So, yeah, may it be just as great for all the other people you interview because you're really good. Thank you.